The rain hammered the coastal cliffs like a relentless interrogation, turning the narrow road to Salerno's edge into a slick ribbon of blacktop. Elena Rossi gripped the steering wheel of her battered Fiat, the wipers slashing futilely against the downpour. She was no stranger to these storms. As a civil engineer for the city's public works department, she'd mapped every culvert and storm drain from Naples to the Amalfi coast. But tonight, the sky seemed to conspire against her, flooding the lowlands where the elite built their empires on borrowed ground. Ahead, the gated drive to Villa Mar Alta loomed through the sheets of water. Iron spikes topped with razor wire, flanked by stone lions that snarled silently in the sodium glow of security lights. This wasn't just any villa. It was the fortified retreat of Marco Vitale, the man whose shadow stretched across southern Italy's construction rackets and shipping lanes. Whispers in boardrooms called him a developer. In back alleys, a boss. Elena had no business here, not really. Her warning was official. A routine report on drainage failures that could submerge half the hillside if the next big swell hit. But Vitale's permits had bypassed every regulation, and her superiors had shrugged it off. "Handle it yourself," they'd said. So here she was, at midnight, uninvited. The gate buzzed open before she could press the intercom, as if they'd been expecting her, or watching. Elena's pulse quickened as she eased the car up the winding drive, tires crunching over gravel that smelled of wet earth and salt spray from the unseen Tyrrhenian Sea below. Palm fronds whipped in the wind, and distant thunder rolled like a warning shot. The villa emerged from the mist, a sprawling modernist fortress of glass and white stone, its lower levels hugging the cliffside, decks cantilevered over a drop that plunged straight to the rocks. Lights blazed from every window, but the air felt heavy, charged with the kind of tension that came from men who carried concealed threats. A broad-shouldered figure in a black rain slicker emerged from the portico, gesturing her toward a valet spot. "Signorina Rossi?" His voice cut through the storm, gravelly and accented with the rough edge of the hinterlands. He was built like a dock worker, eyes scanning her car as if cataloging its weaknesses. "Boss is inside. Park and follow." Elena nodded, killing the engine. The chill seeped through her coat as she stepped out, the rain plastering her dark hair to her forehead. She clutched her leather satchel, the drainage schematics inside now likely smudged, but still her only leverage. Why had she come? Curiosity, maybe. Vitale's reputation as a man who laughed at bureaucracy intrigued her analytical mind. Or was it the gnawing sense that ignoring the reports would drown more than villas? It could wash away lives in the shanties downstream. Her own apartment in the old quarter had flooded twice this season. She knew the cost. The foyer swallowed her like a velvet trap, marble floors echoing underfoot, the scent of aged leather and cigar smoke mingling with the ozone tang of the storm outside. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light on walls lined with abstract art that screamed old money laundering. Two men in tailored suits lounged by a sweeping staircase, their postures casual but eyes locked on her. One murmured into a wrist mic, the static hum barely audible over the rain pattering against floor-to-ceiling windows. "Miss Rossi!" A deeper voice boomed from the shadows of the adjoining lounge. Marco Vitale stepped into view, broad and imposing in a crisp white shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with the scars of a life not spent behind desks. His hair was silvered at the temples, face weathered like the cliffs he owned, but his smile was disarming, sharp, appraising. "You picked a hell of a night to play prophet. Drink?" Elena hesitated, water dripping from her coat onto the priceless rug. "Signor Vitale, I—" "Marco," he corrected, signaling a waiter with a flick of his wrist. A tumbler of amber liquid appeared in her hand. Whiskey, smooth and peaty. He guided her to a leather armchair by the fireplace, its flames crackling against the damp chill. "I've read your report. Drainage, you say. The river's angry, wants to reclaim my little paradise." She sat, unfolding the schematics on the low table between them. The lines blurred slightly in the firelight, red marks where the culverts choked, blue arrows showing how the next torrent would funnel straight into his lower villas. It's not anger, Signor. Marco. It's physics. Your retaining walls are solid, but the outflow pipes are undersized by 30%. We've had seismic shifts in the bedrock. The old drainage can't handle it. One bad storm, and the whole hillside goes under. Your properties, the access roads, everything. He leaned back, swirling his glass, the ice clinking like distant chains. Laughter rumbled from his chest, low and genuine, but it didn't reach his eyes. You engineers and your numbers. Build higher, you say? Or wider? I've poured millions into this. The sea gives, the sea takes. But I don't flood easy. Elena's jaw tightened. She'd expected dismissal, but not this casual arrogance. It's not a joke. The public works data shows similar failures up the coast. 2 homes lost last month in Positano. If you ignore this, it's not just villas. The docks below, your shipments. Water rises. It doesn't discriminate. The room seemed to shrink, the fire's warmth clashing with the cold draft from the windows. Vitale's gaze sharpened, tracing her face as if weighing her resolve. One of the suited men shifted in the corner, phone buzzing softly. A burner, she noted, its glow illuminating a tattoo snaking up his neck. Bold, coming here alone, Marco said finally, his tone shifting to something almost admiring. Most send emails, or lawyers. What makes you think I'll listen to a woman who smells like rain and regret? She met his stare, the whiskey burning a path to her stomach. Because if you don't, you'll lose more than property. And I don't leave loose ends. Thunder crashed outside, rattling the glass, and for a split second, the lights flickered, power straining against the storm. Marco's smile returned, but now it held an edge, like a blade half-drawn. Stay for dinner, Elena. Let's see if your warnings hold water. As the waiter cleared the table, she caught a glimpse through the window. Headlights sweeping the drive below, a black SUV idling too long in the rain, unmarked plates, wipers off, watching, or waiting. Who had tipped them off to her visit? And why did it feel like the flood was already starting? The rain had eased to a persistent drizzle by the time Elena followed Marco Vitale deeper into the villa, her heels clicking against the polished terrazzo like hesitant Morse code. The dining room unfolded like a scene from a forgotten Fellini film. Long oak table under a vaulted ceiling, walls paneled in dark walnut that absorbed the light from a single chandelier. Candles flickered in silver holders, casting shadows that danced across crystal stemware and plates of antipasti. Olives glistening with oil, prosciutto draped like silk. The air carried the briny tang of the sea mixed with garlic and rosemary from the kitchen beyond. But underneath it all lurked the faint metallic scent of wet stone, seeping from the foundations below. Marco pulled out a chair for her, his hand brushing her shoulder just long enough to send a shiver unrelated to the chill. Sit. Enzo will join us, my consigliere. He handles the practicalities. He nodded to the man from the foyer, the one with the tattoo, who took a seat across the table without a word. Enzo's eyes were flat, assessing, like a ledger balanced on a knife's edge. No introductions, no small talk, just the scrape of a corkscrew against a bottle of Aglianico, deep red pouring into glasses with the viscosity of blood. Elena unfolded her napkin, the schematics tucked away now, but her mind raced through the numbers. Flow rates, soil saturation, the inexorable math of water seeking its level. This isn't social, Marco. The drainage issue. Everything's social in my world, he interrupted, raising his glass. The clink echoed softly. To warnings unheeded. May they wash away the weak. His laugh was back, that rumbling baritone, but Enzo didn't join in. Instead, the consigliere's phone vibrated once, muted, but Elena caught the glow under the tablecloth. He glanced at it, thumb hovering, then slipped it away. A burner, she was sure now. The kind that left no trace, unlike the city-issued one in her satchel. As the first course arrived, seared octopus on a bed of arugula, tentacles curling like question marks, Marco leaned forward, elbows on the table in a way that screamed disregard for etiquette. "Tell me, Elena, why public works? You could command twice the salary consulting for men like me, private contracts, no red tape." She speared a piece of octopus, the salt bursting on her tongue, grounding her. Because public means accountability. Not everyone builds on sand. The words hung, pointed. Enzo shifted, his chair creaking, and outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the French doors to the terrace. Through the glass, the cliffside lights blurred in the mist, the sea a black void below. Marco's eyes narrowed, amusement fading to something sharper. Accountability. A pretty word for meddlers. My villas stand because I make them stand. Permits, bought and paid, drains, they'll hold. But as he spoke, Elena noticed the subtle tilt of the table, imperceptible to most, but her engineer's eye caught it. The floor uneven, a hairline crack spidering from the baseboard toward the window. Subsidence, early stage. The ground was shifting, just as her report predicted. Enzo cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Boss, the shipment from the docks, delayed. Storms jamming the manifests." His voice was low, clipped, like a guard rotation update. Marco waved it off, but Elena filed it away. Shipments, docks. Vitale's empire wasn't just villas. It was the underbelly of Salerno's ports, crates vanishing into the night under cover of fog. The conversation veered, Marco probing her life with the ease of a man used to extracting truths. No husband? Family? His tone was casual, but the question felt like a probe, testing for vulnerabilities. Elena sipped her wine, the tannins biting. "Family's complicated. Lost my brother to a construction collapse up north. Shoddy permits, ignored warnings. I stick to facts now." She met his gaze, unflinching. Marco's expression softened, just a fraction, a shadow crossing his face like a memory resurfacing. "Loss shapes us. Mine was a son, years back. Car accident on these roads, slippery as eels in the rain." He paused, fork midway to his mouth. "Makes a man build walls, higher ones." Enzo's phone buzzed again, insistent this time. He excused himself, stepping toward the terrace doors, murmuring into the device. Elena strained to listen, static-laced words. "Plate matches the one from Naples, tailing the service road." Her pulse spiked. The SUV from earlier. Surveillance wasn't just on her. It was on them all. As Enzo returned, his face was a mask, but sweat beaded on his temple despite the room's warmth. Dessert followed, tiramisu dusted with cocoa, rich and masking the bitterness building in Elena's chest. Marco pushed his plate aside, signaling the end. "You've got fire?" Elena Rossi. "Stay the night. Guest rooms secure. Storms worsening. Roads will flood by dawn." She stood, the chair legs scraping like a warning. "I drive in worse, but thank you, for listening at least." It was half true. He'd heard, but not heeded. As they moved toward the hall, a distant rumble shook the villa. Not thunder, but something mechanical, grinding from below. The generator. Or the earth protesting. Marco escorted her to the foyer, his hand light on her elbow. "Think on it. Join me properly. Fix my drains, my docks. We could use a woman who sees the cracks." His breath was warm against her ear, possessive in its promise. But Elena pulled away, grabbing her coat. The air outside hit like a slap, rain resuming in sheets. She slid into her Fiat, engine coughing to life, but as she glanced in the rear view, the terrace lights caught Enzo on his phone again, gesturing urgently to two shadows emerging from the garden. And there, at the gate's edge, the black SUV idled once more, its driver obscured by tinted glass. Had they followed her here? Or was Vitale's world already cracking under its own weight? As she accelerated down the drive, tires hydroplaning on the slick gravel, a crackle burst from her car radio. Unbidden static. Then a voice. "Rossi, you at Vitale's? Get out. Now." Who was on the other end, and how did they know? Elena's tires skidded on the rain-slicked gravel as she punched the accelerator, the Fiat's engine whining in protest against the downpour. The voice on the radio had cut out as abruptly as it started, garbled static now hissing like a serpent in the speakers. She fumbled with the dial, heart slamming against her ribs, but only white noise answered. Who the hell was that? Her department issued her a standard radio for fieldwork, not for anonymous warnings. And how did they know she was at Vitale's? The gate receded in the rear view, its spikes vanishing into the mist, but the black SUV's headlights pierced the gloom behind her, twin eyes unblinking in pursuit. The coastal road twisted like a vein along the cliffside, sodium lamps casting erratic pools of yellow on the flooded asphalt. Water cascaded from the rocks above, turning the shoulder into a rushing torrent that clawed at the guardrail. Elena's wipers thrashed furiously, but visibility was a joke, maybe 20 meters ahead if she was lucky. She glanced at the mirrors again. The SUV was gaining, its bulk cutting through the spray like a shark through surf. No plates visible, just the low growl of its engine vibrating through the chassis. Panic clawed at her throat, but she forced her engineer's mind to engage. Calculate the turns, the drop-offs, the storm drains that might already be overwhelmed. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. Unknown number, a text flashing. Head to the old service tunnel at KM12. Lose them there. She swerved to avoid a fallen branch, the message searing into her brain. Tunnel? That was an abandoned maintenance access for the coastal railway, sealed years ago after a collapse. No one went there, especially not in this weather. But the alternative was the open road, exposed to whatever game Vitale's enemies, or his own men, were playing. The SUV surged closer, its high beams blinding her momentarily. A horn blared, unnecessary aggression, as if testing her nerve. "Damn it," she muttered, downshifting to hug the curve. The Fiat fishtailed, gravel spraying into the void below where the sea churned black and furious. Ahead, the kilometer marker loomed, KM 12. A chain-link fence sagged across a narrow pullout, rusted signs warning of instability in Italian and faded English. No time to second-guess. Elena yanked the wheel, bouncing over the verge, the undercarriage scraping against concrete debris. The SUV braked hard behind her, tires locking in a screech that echoed off the cliffs, but she was already out, slamming the door and sprinting toward the fence. Rain stung her face, soaking her blouse to the skin, the metallic tang of rust filling her nostrils as she clawed at the chain link. Footsteps pounded behind her, heavy, deliberate. "Signorina Rossi, stop." It was the gravelly voice from the villa, the slicker-clad guard, not the SUV driver then. She twisted through a gap in the fence, tearing her coat, and plunged into the underbrush toward the tunnel mouth, a yawning black maw half buried in vines and mudslide scree. The air grew cooler, damper, carrying the earthy rot of stagnant water and moldering concrete. Her flashlight app pierced the darkness as she stumbled inside, the beam jittering across graffiti-scarred walls and puddles that reflected her frantic face. The tunnel swallowed sound, amplifying her ragged breaths and the distant roar of the storm. She pressed against the damp wall, listening. Footsteps echoed outside, then silence, broken by the crackle of a radio. "Boss, she's in the access. Got the plate from the tail. It's Rizzo's crew. Naples plates. Fake reg." Rizzo? The name tugged at a memory. A rival developer. Whispers of turf wars over port contracts. Vitale's shipments, Enzo mentioned. Rizzo must be sniffing for leverage, using the storm as cover. But why target her? Collateral in their drainage dispute? A beam of light sliced the entrance, sweeping side to side. Elena edged deeper, her shoes squelching in ankle-deep water that smelled of brine and decay. The tunnel narrowed, rebar jutting like ribs from cracks in the ceiling. Seismic damage, just like her reports warned. If the ground shifted now. She shook it off, focusing on the faint glow ahead. An emergency exit, maybe, or just reflected stormlight. Her phone vibrated again. Same unknown number. Keep moving. Help at the far end. Don't trust the guards. Trust? The word burned. Vitale's laugh echoed in her mind, dismissing her warnings while his world unraveled. Was this his doing, staging a chase to pull her deeper into his web? Or genuine danger, her meddling stirring a hornet's nest? She rounded a bend, the tunnel opening into a wider chamber where old rail ties rotted in the muck. Footsteps echoed closer, multiple now. Elena, Marco's voice, unmistakable, booming from the entrance. It's me. Rizzo's men are here. Get back. She froze, beam catching a side passage, a service ladder bolted to the wall, leading up to what might be the cliff road above. But as she reached for the rungs, a shadow detached from the wall ahead. Tall, hooded, blocking the exit. Not Vitale's man. The figure raised a hand, not in threat but signal. A quick flash of a phone screen, the same message she'd received. Allie? Or another layer of the trap? Water gurgled louder, rising from unseen cracks in the floor. The storm infiltrating, just as she'd predicted. The tunnel floor trembled faintly, a low groan from the earth. Marco's voice called again, closer, laced with urgency that sounded too real. Elena, the drainage, it's failing. Come out. She gripped the ladder, torn between the known devil and the shadows ahead. Rizzo's crew, Vitale's guards, the anonymous texter, who was pulling the strings, and would the flood reach them first? As the water lapped at her calves, cold and insistent, a muffled explosion rocked the entrance. Flashbang? Diversion, or the real collapse beginning. If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The water surged around Elena's ankles, cold and relentless, carrying the grit of silt and shattered stone. The tunnel's groan deepened, a subterranean rumble that vibrated through the concrete like the earth's own warning. She released the ladder rung, her fingers numb, and swung her flashlight beam toward the shadow ahead. The figure didn't flinch, hooded, rain-slicked jacket blending into the gloom, but the phone in his gloved hand glowed with another message. This way. Rizzo's blocking the road above. No name, no explanation, just coordinates flickering on the screen before it went dark. Elena! Marco's shout echoed again, closer now, boots splashing through the rising flood. The muffled explosion at the entrance had faded, leaving only the hiss of steam or sparks, perhaps a sabotaged flare from the guards, or Rizzo's crew rigging a diversion to flush them out. She hesitated, the anonymous ally's signal pulling her forward while every instinct screamed to turn back toward the voice she knew. Marco Vitale, the man who'd laughed off her warnings, now sounding like a man who'd swallowed his pride. Or was it a ploy? The shadow moved, gesturing sharply toward the side passage, a narrow vent shaft, barely wide enough for one. Elena dashed forward, water sloshing to her knees, the chill seeping through her soaked pants like icy fingers. Up close, the figure smelled of diesel and sea salt, a faint accent from the docks clipping his whisper. Hurry. The culvert's breached. Your report was right. He pushed a metal grate aside with a scrape that set her teeth on edge, revealing a crawl space laced with exposed wiring and the drip of infiltrating rain. No time for questions. She dropped to her hands and knees, the rough concrete biting into her palms as she scrambled in, the ally sealing the grate behind them. The shaft twisted upward, a forgotten artery of the old railway system, lit only by her phone's dimming battery. Behind her, the Allies' breaths came steady, guiding her with terse directions. Left at the junction. Watch the rebar, shifted last quake. Elena's mind raced through the schematics she'd memorized. This network connected to the main drainage outflow, designed to shunt storm water to the sea, but clogged for years by neglect and illicit dumping. Vitaly's empire had probably used it for smuggling, crates of contraband vanishing into the cliffs. If Rizzo's crew knew about her visit, they knew the vulnerabilities too, turning her warning into a weapon. A distant crash reverberated, concrete giving way, perhaps at the tunnel mouth. Marco's voice cut through, muffled but furious. "Enzo, get the extraction team. Tell them the lower villa's compromised." Extraction? So the chase wasn't random. It was coordinated. Elena's ally paused at a rusted hatch, prying it open with a crowbar that clanged like a gunshot in the confined space. They emerged into a maintenance alcove high on the cliffside, the storm wind whipping in from a jagged vent overlooking the roiling sea. Below, the coastal road snaked like a scar, headlights weaving erratically. SUVs, multiple now, boxing in Marco's armored Mercedes as it barreled from the villa gates. "They're pinching him," the ally muttered, peering through binoculars snatched from an alcove shelf. "Rizzo's got insiders. Look at the plates on that lead car. Municipal issue, but the mods scream black market." Elena snatched the binoculars, her engineer's eye spotting the discrepancies. Oversized tires for off-road evasion, reinforced bumpers hiding rams. And the plates, faked but sloppy. The laminate bubbled from the rain, revealing a partial match to a vehicle from her department's impound logs. Institutional limits. Human error. Someone in public works was leaking, turning oversight into opportunity. She lowered the glasses, rain blurring her vision. "Who are you? Why help me?" The ally turned, hood falling back to reveal a weathered face. Mid-40s, scarred jawline from old dock fights. "Name's Luca. Used to run security for Vitale before Rizzo bought out my crew. Your warning came through a contact. Old ledger from the port manifests. Rizzo's been siphoning drainage funds, weakening the whole coast to crash Vitale's shipments. You're the loose end they want tied." Luca's words hit like the next wave crashing below, foam spraying up the rocks. Betrayal layered on betrayal. Not just rivals, but embezzlement rotting the infrastructure from within. Elena's own department? Complicit? Her brother's collapse flashed in her mind. Shoddy permits, ignored warnings. History repeating, but now with lives like hers in the crossfire. Shouts erupted from the road below, Marco's Mercedes swerving as a shot cracked the night, not hitting tires but shattering a taillight in warning. No graphic spray of blood, just the sharp report echoing off the cliffs, guards returning fire from the villa's perimeter. Sirens wailed in the distance, too far to matter. Local police were bought or blind. Marco's car fishtailed, hydroplaning toward the guardrail, but he corrected with a roar that carried even here, possessive, unyielding. "We can't leave him," Elena said, the words surprising her, autonomy clashing with the pull she'd felt in the villa's firelight, his touch on her elbow a spark amid the storm. Luca shook his head. "You think like an engineer. Fix it from afar. But Vitale's code. He protects what's his. And after tonight, he thinks that's you." A burner phone buzzed in Luca's pocket. Same model as Enzo's. He answered in clipped Italian, then cursed. "Change of plans. The villas. Water's rising fast. Breached the lower walls. Rizzo's using the flood to hit the safe house." Elena's stomach dropped. Her predictions mocked, now weaponized. The drainage failure wasn't just a risk. It was the trap. She grabbed Luca's arm, the wind tearing at her hair. "Then we go back. Use the service path. Cut them off at the outflow. Loyalty versus fear, her ethics demanding action, while suspicion whispered of deeper games." Marco's laugh echoed in her memory. but so did his shadowed loss, mirroring her own. As they descended a overgrown trail toward the chaos, another rumble shook the ground. The earth protesting, or the flood claiming its first villa. And if they reached him in time, what price would Vitale demand for pulling her into his crumbling world? The trail clawed downward like a vein exposed by the storm, slick with mud and tangled roots that snagged Elena's shoes with every step. Salt spray mingled with the downpour, stinging her eyes as she and Luca half slid, half ran toward the villa's lower perimeter. The rumble had grown into a continuous growl, the earth shifting underfoot, subtle at first, then jarring, sending pebbles skittering into the void. Below, the Tyrrhenian sea roared its approval, waves slamming the rocks in rhythmic fury, while the air thickened with the acrid bite of electrical shorts and the faint, oily smoke of something burning. Luca led, his crowbar slung over one shoulder like a makeshift weapon, burner phone clipped to his belt buzzing intermittently. "Stay low," he hissed over the wind, pointing to a chain of floodlights flickering along the cliff base. Vitale's security grid, now sputtering as water infiltrated the conduits. Elena's breath came in sharp bursts, her soaked clothes heavy as chainmail, but adrenaline sharpened her senses. The distant crack of another warning shot, the low hum of generators straining at the villa's edge, and the unmistakable gurgle of water surging through breached pipes. Her warnings, once dismissed, now orchestrated the chaos, Rizzo's sabotage turning drainage flaws into a siege weapon. They crested a ridge overlooking the lower villas, a cluster of terraced estates hugging the hillside like precarious jewels. The sight hit Elena like a gut punch. The outermost structure, a sleek glass and stone retreat meant for Vitale's inner circle, tilted visibly, its foundation undermined by a muddy torrent pouring from a ruptured culvert. Sodium lights cast an eerie orange glow on the rising flood, reflecting off debris. Upended lounge chairs, shattered planters, bobbing like flotsam. Guards in black tactical gear waded knee-deep, rifles raised toward shadows moving along the access road. Marco's Mercedes was pinned against the guardrail, doors ajar, engine steaming from a bullet-punctured radiator. "There," Luca whispered, dropping to a crouch behind a boulder. He handed her the binoculars again. Elena focused through the rain-lashed lenses. Enzo, Vitale's consigliere, barking orders into a radio near the main house. But his posture was off. Too rigid, eyes darting not to the threats below, but to a side path where a nondescript sedan idled, its driver obscured. Partial plates visible, municipal green, but the sticker on the bumper matched impound logs she'd reviewed last month, stolen from Public Works fleet. "Enzo's signaling," she murmured, pulse thundering. "That's no extraction. He's the leak, feeding Rizzo the manifest, the drainage weak points." Luca's scarred face hardened, a flicker of old loyalty warring with betrayal's sting. "Knew it. The ledger we pulled from the docks, discreet entries for consulting fees. Rizzo's been paying him to siphon funds. Let the pipes rot. Your report spooked them. They accelerated the flood to bury Vitale's shipments in the bay." He gripped the crowbar tighter, the metal slick in his hand. Human error, institutional rot. Enzo's greed had turned oversight into a noose, pulling Elena's ethics into the fray. She thought of her brother's collapse, permits rubber-stamped by men like this, ambition devouring prudence, leaving graves in the rubble. A scream cut the night from the lower villa, not pain, but alarm, as water breached the terrace doors, glass shattering in a cascade. Marco emerged from the Mercedes, coat torn, shoving a guard toward cover while scanning the cliffs. His eyes, even from afar, locked on their ridge as if sensing her presence. Possessiveness flashed in his stance, broad shoulders squared against the deluge. But Elena felt the pull and push. His world demanded loyalty, hers autonomy. Yet here she was, descending into the flood for a man who'd laughed at her fears. "Cover me," Luca said, starting down a steeper embankment toward the outflow pipe. a massive concrete throat now vomiting water like a breached dam. Elena nodded, pocketing her phone to free her hands, the anonymous texter's last message burning in her mind. Out flows the key. Jam it upstream. She scrambled after him, the trail devolving into a sluice of mud that sucked at her legs. The wind carried snippets of radio chatter. "Boss, the convoy's jammed. Roadblock at the tunnel exit. Rizzo's got heavies inbound." False alarm or staged. The storm masked it all, thunder drowning the lies. They reached the pipe's mouth, a yawning breach where rebar twisted like exposed bones. Water roared out, foaming white, carrying the stench of sewage and salt water. Luca wedged the crowbar into a control valve housing, muscles straining as he pried at the rusted mechanism. "Help! Twist the secondary." Elena knelt in the torrent, her fingers numb on the wheel, turning it against the pressure. Inch by inch the flow diverted, easing the surge toward the villas but buying time. Credible engineering under fire. No miracles, just sweat and leverage against the physics. Gunfire erupted closer, bullets ricocheting off rocks as Rizzo's men infiltrated from the service road, shadows weaving through the floodlit haze. Marco's voice boomed over the din. "Elena, up here, now." He was climbing the ridge toward them, guards flanking, but Enzo hung back, phone to his ear, gesturing subtly to the sedan. Betrayal confirmed, the consigliere's behavioral tell, a averted glance, a too casual stance, sealing his turncoat status. Luca yanked the valve shut with a final grunt, the pipe's roar dulling to a hiss. "It's holding, for now. But we need to extract Vitale before the whole hillside goes." Elena rose, water streaming from her hair, meeting Marco's gaze as he crested the ridge. His face was etched with storm and strain, silver hair plastered, but his hand extended, not command, but alliance. "You came back," he said, voice low amid the chaos, the words laced with that disarming edge. "Knew you would." She took his hand, the warmth cutting the cold, loyalty clashing with suspicion. "Not for you, for the truth." But as they turned toward the upper trail, a new rumble built. Not thunder, but the groan of settling earth. Lights flickered across the villas, a blackout spreading like ink in water. Enzo's sedan peeled away, taillights vanishing into the mist. Had the consigliere fled with the ledger's secrets, or called in reinforcements? And with the flood diverted, but the ground unstable, would Vitale's code of protection extend to letting her walk away unscathed? Marco's grip was ironclad yet surprisingly steady, pulling Elena up the final stretch of the ridge as the blackout swallowed the villas below in piecemeal darkness. The floodlights died one by one, plunging the hillside into a void, broken only by the erratic flash of distant lightning and the strobing blue of emergency beacons from Marco's perimeter guards. The air hummed with the low thrum of backup generators kicking in, their exhaust mingling with the sharp ozone of shorted wires and the earthy musk of upturned soil. Water still trickled from the diverted culvert, a subdued hiss now, but the ground beneath their feet felt alive, subtle tremors rippling like aftershocks from the storm's assault. Luca flanked them, crowbar at the ready, his eyes scanning the shadows where Enzo's sedan had vanished. "He's gone to ground," Luca growled, voice barely audible over the wind's howl. "That rat's got the ledger, shipping codes, drainage payoffs. Rizzo'll have the docks locked down by dawn." Marco's jaw clenched, the scars on his forearms standing out white in the gloom as he released Elena's hand, only to hover it near her back. Protective, possessive, a silent claim amid the unraveling. They crested the upper trail, boots sinking into mud that sucked like quicksand. The path narrowed by encroaching brush and the relentless patter of rain. Elena's lungs burned, her mind a whirlwind of calculations. The subsidence rate accelerating with the water weight, the cliff's sheer strength compromised by years of unchecked erosion. Vitale's laugh echoed in her thoughts, that dismissive rumble now soured by the reality crashing around them. Your code, she said, breathless, matching his stride. Protect what's yours. Does that include loose ends like me? Marco shot her a sidelong glance, silver hair whipping in the gusts, his white shirt translucent and clinging like a second skin. You fixed the pipe. That's not loose. It's leverage. His tone carried that edge, admiration laced with the raw hunger of a man who'd lost enough to value what fought back. But suspicion lingered in her chest, autonomy warring with the spark ignited in the villa's firelight. Trust him? Or was this another layer, his world pulling her under like the flood? A radio crackled from Luca's belt, static-laced urgency. Boss, convoys through the roadblock. 5 minutes to the safe house turnoff. But the lower dock's underwater. Manifests washed, 2 guards down. No details on the men, just the cost in logistics. Crates of whatever shadowed cargo Vitale moved, now fodder for the sea. Marco snatched the device, barking coordinates in clipped Italian, his free hand gesturing to a concealed trail marker. A reflective strip on a tree, invisible in daylight. Double the watch on the penthouse. No one in or out without my say. The safe house loomed ahead, not the opulent villa, but a squat concrete bunker disguised as an old boathouse at the cliff's midpoint, its reinforced doors camouflaged by salt-crusted vines. Sodium lamps inside flickered to life as they approached, casting a jaundiced glow through slit windows. 2 guards emerged, rifles slung low, one murmuring into a wrist mic, while the other scanned their approach with a thermal scope. Technology off the shelf, but tuned for the paranoia of men like Vitale. The scent of diesel from a hidden generator wafted out, grounding the scene in gritty reality. No high-tech miracles, just diesel fumes and the faint brine of the sea lapping at the foundation. Inside, the space unfolded starkly. Bare walls lined with monitors showing grainy feeds from villa cams, a table strewn with maps and burner phones, the air thick with coffee and gun oil. Marco shrugged off his coat, revealing a shoulder holster that hadn't been there during dinner, the leather creaking as he moved to the central console. Enzo's betrayal. How long? He demanded of Luca, who was already punching access codes into a secure line. Months, Luca replied, pulling a discreet ledger from a hidden drawer. Leather-bound, pages filled with coded entries, dates matching drainage fund diversions, plate numbers linking to Rizzo's fleet. He rerouted payments through public works shells. Your shipments were the target. Flood the docks, blame the storm. Elena's report. It lit the fuse. He slid the book toward her, a subtle invitation to verify. Elena traced the lines, her engineer's precision spotting the tells. Inconsistencies in flow estimates, behavioral notes on guard rotations that mirrored Enzo's subtle gestures at dinner. Human greed, institutional blind spots, Rizzo's infiltration explained by a turncoat's access, not some grand conspiracy. Marco's fist tightened on the table edge, knuckles whitening. He was like family, vowed after my son. The words trailed, his past loss surfacing like a submerged rock, shaping the code that restrained his empire's sharper edges. Never harm innocents. That vow now tested as the flood threatened downstream shanties, lives she'd mapped in her reports. Elena met his gaze, the room's hum underscoring the tension. Family's what you choose, she said softly, echoing her own scars. But loyalty's earned, not demanded. He stepped closer, the space between them charged, his hand brushing hers on the ledger, a touch that promised protection but demanded surrender. Stay, help me end this. Your eyes see what mine miss. Possessiveness in his voice, but undercut by vulnerability, the push-pull of 2 worlds colliding. Elena pulled back slightly, ethics clashing with the magnetic pull. I'm no one's asset, Marco. Fix your drains, your betrayals, then maybe. Luca's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. A relayed alert from the convoy. Incoming. Rizzo's heavies on the service road, jamming the exit with a staged slide. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the grind of shifting earth, the blackout's edge creeping closer. Monitors flickered, one feed catching a flicker of movement at the villa's submerged edge. Figures in the water, not guards, but intruders prying at a safe. Had Enzo left a back door, or was the flood itself the infiltration? As Marco grabbed a jacket, eyes locking on hers with unspoken resolve, Elena wondered, would the safe house hold, or would Rizzo's next move wash away the fragile trust they'd salvaged? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The safe house's monitors cast a staccato blue glow across Marco's face, etching shadows that deepened the lines of strain around his eyes. The air inside hung heavy with the diesel tang from the generator, and the faint, acrid bite of ozone from the flickering screens, where feeds from the villa perimeter stuttered like a failing heartbeat. Elena stood at the table's edge, the ledger's pages open before her, fingers tracing the final entries. Coded transfers to offshore shells, timestamps aligning with seismic surveys her department had buried under budget cuts. Rizzo's web wasn't just rivalry, it was a calculated erosion, siphoning public funds to weaken Vitali's coastal grip, turning natural storms into engineered disasters. Luca paced the narrow room, his boots thudding softly on the concrete floor, burner phone pressed to his ear as he relayed updates to the convoy. Roadblocks a fake, staged slide with municipal gravel haulers. Plates match the impound logs again. Clean it up, but watch for tails. He hung up, rubbing the scar on his jaw, the motion betraying a flicker of unease. They're probing, boss. Not a full assault. Yet. Enzo's tip-off bought them time to tamper with the outflow sensors. If the flood surges back... Marco didn't look up from the central console, his fingers flying over a keyboard to pull up archived manifests. Shipping logs disguised as construction bids. The clack of keys punctuated the hum of cooling fans, a mechanical rhythm underscoring the tension. He knew my code. No innocence. That's why he hit the villas first. Scare the families out. Make it look like the storm. His voice was low, edged with the gravel of restrained fury. But Elena caught the undercurrent. The personal sting. Vows cracked by a man's ambition. Legacy wasn't just power. It was the restraint that kept the empire from devouring itself. She leaned closer to the screen, the glow illuminating the subtle discrepancies in the drainage blueprints overlaid with the ledger's notes. Access codes for the culvert valves, ones only public works insiders held, cross-referenced with Enzo's guard rotation logs. Behavioral tells she'd overlooked at dinner. His averted glances, the thumb hovering over his phone not in habit, but calculation. It's deeper than payoffs, she said, her voice steady despite the chill seeping from the concrete walls. Rizzo's using the seismic data to predict shifts. They jammed the sensors to fake a stable read, bought time to flood the docks without tripping alarms. Human error on our end, outdated backups in the department database. Marco's hand paused, turning to her with that appraising stare, the possessiveness in it softened by genuine respect. You see it all. Join me, Elena. Not as a guest, but equal. Fix this rot. He stepped nearer, the space between them shrinking, his warmth cutting through the damp cold like a promise. But she held her ground, autonomy a shield against the pull, his world of shadows clashing with her ethics of transparency. Equals don't own each other, Marco. I came for the truth, not a throne in your bunker. Luca's phone buzzed again, shattering the moment, a sharp vibration that echoed off the bare walls. He answered, face paling under the monitor's light. Copy. Blackouts spreading. Power grid sabotage at the main substation. Storms cover, but the cuts are too clean. Drones inbound? He listened, then cursed softly. Rizzo's tech. Commercial surveillance rigs, off the shelf with night vision mods, watching the convoy from the ridge. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the reinforced door like an impatient fist, while distant generators whined in protest, their sodium hum fading to sporadic flickers. Marco grabbed a tactical vest from a locker, slinging it on with practiced efficiency, the Velcro rasping like a warning. Escorts botched. We move now. Penthouse via the tunnel link. Luca, rig the diversions. Flare the lower feeds. Make them think we're pinned. He turned to Elena, eyes locking with an intensity that demanded without words. You with us? Loyalty versus fear played across his features, the code that bound him now extending like a lifeline, or a chain. She nodded, snatching a rain jacket from the hook, the fabric heavy with the scent of mildew and salt, for the shanties downstream. If the surge hits, it's not just your villas. They slipped out the back, into a concealed access hatch that dropped them into a service tunnel. Narrow and dripping, the air thick with the moldy rot of disuse. Flashlights pierced the gloom, beams dancing over rusted pipes and puddles that mirrored their tense faces. The tunnel sloped upward, a vein toward the penthouse perched higher on the cliffs, but every step echoed too loudly, the ground vibrating with the storm's subsurface fury. Halfway in, Luca froze, raising a hand. Hear that? A low grind, not thunder, mechanical, like gears straining. Elena's beam caught it. A grate ahead, partially ajar, water trickling through from above. Compromised, she whispered, heart pounding. Enzo's access code, someone's ahead. Surveillance wasn't distant watchers. It was infiltration, rivals using the very flaws she'd warned about. Marco drew a compact pistol from his holster, the metal glinting coldly. But he kept it low, no rash moves, his code holding, even here. They pressed on, the tunnel narrowing, walls closing like a vice. Elena's mind raced. Calculate the pressure, the weak points. A sudden jolt rocked them, earth settling, or a staged diversion. Debris rained from the ceiling, dust choking the air, forcing a cough from her throat. Marco pulled her close, arm shielding, his breath warm against her ear. Stay behind me. Possessiveness raw, but she pushed forward, spotting the grate's latch. Tampered, wires snipped from an alarm sensor. It's a trap door, for extraction or ambush. Luca wedged his crowbar, prying it open to reveal a ladder rising to the penthouse sublevel. But as they climbed, a shadow flickered above, silhouetted against the emergency lights. Not Enzo, but a stranger in a hooded slicker, burner phone in hand. Ally or enemy? The figure vanished as quickly, leaving only the echo of footsteps retreating. Had Rizzo's men breached, or was Luca's old crew circling back? As they emerged into the penthouse's dimly lit garage, tires screeching from an approaching convoy outside, Marco's radio crackled. Boss? The Ledger's location. Enzo's transmitting it live. Rizzo knows the safe codes. Elena's blood ran cold, the pieces snapping together, betrayal's final play, exposing not just shipments, but the heart of Vitale's operations. With the blackout deepening and watchers closing in, would they secure the penthouse in time, or had Enzo's greed already flooded the last bastion? The penthouse garage loomed like a concrete cavern, its reinforced walls humming with the vibration of the storm above, the air thick with the metallic tang of oil and the faint, acrid whiff of overheated brakes from the convoy screeching to a halt outside. Elena's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating rows of sleek vehicles shrouded in dust covers, Vitale's armored fleet, now potential traps if Rizzo's infiltration had reached the codes. Marco moved first, pistol drawn low, his silhouette sharp against the emergency strips flickering along the floor. Luca flanked him, crowbar gripped like an extension of his arm, while Elena brought up the rear, her soaked shoes squelching on the grated metal, every echo amplified in the confined space. Codes compromised, Marco muttered into his radio, voice a controlled growl over the static. Seal the upper levels, override with the secondary protocol. The response crackled back, affirmative, but laced with urgency. Guards repositioning, monitors showing shadows slipping through the blackout zones. Enzo's transmission, that final betrayal, had lit the fuse. The consigliere's greed had sold not just ledgers, but the penthouse's digital veins, access panels, surveillance angles, even the burner phone relays. Elena's mind raced through the logistics. Commercial firewalls, common in high-end builds, but vulnerable to insider tweaks. No impossible hacks, just human oversight, a turncoat's thumb on the scale. They reached the service elevator, its doors ajar like a hesitant invitation. The interior lit by a single red emergency bulb, pulsing like a warning heartbeat. Marco punched the override, the mechanism grinding to life with a reluctant whine, cables straining against the storm's subsurface tremors. Rizzo's drones, thermal scans from the ridge, Luca warned, glancing at his phone's feed, a jury-rigged app pulling from the convoy's cams. They're vectoring on the garage vents. 5 minutes, tops. Outside, thunder rolled, masking the distant grind of a staged diversion, perhaps a controlled slide on the access road. Gravel and mud funneled to block escapes, turning the cliff into a natural prison. The elevator lurched upward, the air growing warmer, laced with the faint scent of expensive cologne and polished wood from the penthouse above. Elena pressed against the wall, her pulse sinking with the ascent's judders, autonomy clashing with the raw pull of Marco's presence beside her, his shoulder brushing hers, a silent anchor in the chaos. "This ends tonight," he said, eyes on the closing doors, but the words carried deeper. His code, that vow against innocence, now bending to protect the fragile alliance they'd forged. Fear gnawed at her. Loyalty to a man whose laugh had dismissed her world, yet whose losses mirrored her own, binding them in shared scars. The doors parted into the penthouse foyer, a stark contrast to the villa's opulence. Minimalist lines of steel and glass, walls lined with secure servers humming softly, the storm visible through floor-to-ceiling windows where rain lashed like frantic fingers. Guards materialized from alcoves, rifles at the ready, one murmuring into a wrist mic about perimeter breaches, false alarms at the east wing, a jammed exit on the service stairs. But Elena spotted the tell, a side panel light blinking erratically, access code tampered, the subtle behavioral shift in a guard's stance, eyes too wide, hand twitching toward a pocket. "Wait," she hissed, grabbing Marco's arm. "That one's off. Plate on his vest matches the impound logs. Rizzo's plant." Marco's reaction was swift, a nod to Luca, who disarmed the man with a precise twist, the crowbar clanging against the floor as the traitor slumped, bound and gagged without a shot fired. No graphic struggle, just the efficiency of men versed in internal purges. The guard's phone tumbled out, a burner, screen glowing with Enzo's coordinates, confirming the infiltration. Rivals seated like weeds in the ranks, using the blackout to slip through guard rotations skewed by the storm's diversions. Alarms blared suddenly, red light strobing as monitors across the room lit up with feeds. Figures breaching the terrace doors, hooded and armed, the flood below providing cover as they repelled from the ridge. Rizzo's crew, organized and relentless, turning the environment hazardous, water seeping under the thresholds, shorting outlets in sparks that danced like fireflies. Marco shoved Elena toward the central console, his hand lingering on her waist, possessive yet urgent. "Lock it down. Reroute the power to the barriers." She complied, fingers flying over the keys, pulling from her public works knowledge. Triage choices, prioritizing the structural feeds to seal the penthouse without trapping them inside. The system groaned, fans whirring louder, but the terrace doors clamped shut, just as shadows pressed against the glass. Gunfire rattled outside, muffled by the reinforcements, guards exchanging fire with the intruders, a botched escort turning into a standoff. Luca hauled in a secure line from the convoy, relaying the ledger's digitized backup. Manifest safe, but Enzo's live feed exposing the final prize, a hidden vault in the sublevel, holding not just cash, but the coded vows of Vitale's alliances, his personal code etched in discrete ledgers. "They're after the vault," Marco confirmed, pistol raised toward the foyer as a distant explosion rocked the building. not fire, but a staged breach charge on the lower garage, vibrations shaking the foundations. The ground trembled, cracks spidering across the floor. Seismic stress amplified by the flood's weight, the earth reclaiming what Rizzo had weakened. In the chaos, Marco turned to her, the strobes carving his face in stark relief. "Go. Tunnel to the extraction point. I'll cover." But Elena shook her head, grabbing a tablet to jam the drone signals, simple frequency blockers, off-the-shelf tech disrupting the surveillance. "Not without you. Your code, protect innocence. That includes us." The push-pull peaked, her independence yielding to trust forged in the deluge. His possessiveness tempered by the realization. She wasn't a possession, but a partner in the fight. The climax unfolded in a race against the collapsing barriers. They bolted to the vault, Luca prying it open as bullets pinged off the armored walls. Inside, the ledgers, leather-bound truths of betrayals and vows, were snatched. Enzo's transmission severed with a final override. Rizzo's men retreated under the guards' counterfire, the threat real and organized. But victory came at cost. A guard exposed in the exchange, carried out with a shoulder wound, the penthouse's lower levels flooded and uninhabitable. Marco's empire scarred by the exposure of his inner circle's rot. As the convoy extracted them under cover of renewed rain, sirens wailing in futile pursuit, Elena realized the true treasure. Not the ledger's power, but the protection they'd built. Trust amid the storm. A found family emerging from the wreckage. Dawn broke gray over the cliffs, the storm ebbing to a drizzle that pattered against the safe house windows like hesitant applause. Marco stood at the terrace, bandaged arm a reminder of a grazed bullet during the vault scramble, his gaze on the receding floodwaters lapping at the docks below. The villas would need rebuilding, Rizzo's network dismantled through credible channels, arrests via the recovered ledgers, public works audits exposing the embezzlement. Enzo, captured at a roadblock, faced his vows broken, ambition's price paid in chains. Elena joined him, the air fresh with salt and wet earth, her own scrapes aching but unbowed. "You laughed at my warnings," she said softly. No accusation, just truth. He turned, smile wry, the silver in his hair catching the light. "And you proved them. Stay. Not as mine, but with me. Build something real." The code evolved, restraint yielding to partnership, loyalty outlasting the power plays. In the quiet, the adventure's weight settled, not the spoils of villas or shipments, but the memories etched in mud and fire. Transformation through shared peril, chosen bonds stronger than any flood. As the sun pierced the clouds, casting gold on the waves, they faced the horizon together, the empire remade not in dominance, but in the quiet vow of mutual guard. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.